Welcome to the Booktopia podcast. I'm Sarah McDuling. I'm here today with my colleague Shanu Prasad.
Hello.
And we are both really delighted and excited and a little bit starstruck to be sitting here with beloved Australian storyteller Emily Rodda.
Hello.
Hello. Good to meet you.
Thank you for joining us. Now, you're here today to talk about your brand new book, Eliza Vanda's Button Box. For all the people listening, would you mind outlining a little bit about what they can expect from your new book?
Oh, well, it's about a girl called Millie, a shy girl, a quiet girl, and a lot of things are happening in her life. It's changing, and she's not quite happy about it. She lives in a little beach called Tidji Bay, where her father has a row of holiday cabins that he rents, and she's always been really happy until just the last few months when she seems to be problems everywhere she looks. Anyway, the amazing Eliza Vanda turns up at the holiday cabins wanting to rent a cabin, and she moves in. Of course, they're all empty because it's winter, so she's able to move in. And before very long at all, Millie finds herself running messages for Eliza Vanda and discovers that Eliza Vanda, with her magic button box and all her sort of black jelly beans and her weird habits, is also a very extraordinary magic person, because her button box takes you to other worlds. And Millie finds herself in other worlds running messages for Eliza, and incidentally solving quite a lot of her own problems and other people's as well. That's what it's about.
Hearing you talk about it just sweeps me back into the story. I loved this so much.
Thank you.
Shanu and I have both been talking about it, how much we were charmed by this book. It's really like bursting with whimsy and magic.
And just such wonderful, like you have a way of really, I think, helping children sort of articulate feelings that they kind of don't know how to articulate, and but doing it in such an engaging way. And I mean, that's what happens when you've been, you're at the top of your craft, which you clearly are here.
Thank you.
So, there's lots of books that, you start good and then get better and da-da-da. There's not heaps and heaps of books that have like the best opening paragraph that just like sets up exactly what the book's going to be. Would you do us the very kind favour of reading us your opening paragraph, please?
Oh, the first paragraph.
Yeah, and brace yourself, listeners, because after you hear the first paragraph, you're going to be really upset that you can't immediately continue reading the rest of the book.
Exactly.
No one saw Eliza Vanda arrive in Tidji Bay that rainy winter afternoon. No one saw her give a pleased little nod at the 5 holiday cabins strung along the road that ran beside the beach. And no one saw her eyes twinkle as they turned to the small pointy-roofed house called Spindrift, which sat at the head of a row of cabins like a mother duck leading a line of ducklings.
Oh, see?
You just know. It sets the scene so well. Here's this magical woman appearing, and what's going to happen next, and where is this story going to go? All of your reading senses are alight, I feel.
I'm very glad. That's what I was hoping you would feel.
Now, part of this story involves some travelling into different worlds, or patches and pockets, as they're referred to.
Which is another great sewing reference, by the way.
Yeah, I loved that. And, you've got 3 different worlds now. They're quite different. But I really wanted to talk about Blanca.
Yes.
Where you have the concept of myces.
Myces, yes.
Yeah, could you explain that?
In Blanca, people have some of their emotions not inside their heads but outside. So, for example, their tempers, their curiosities, their senses of humour. So, for example, if you lose your sense of humour, or your sense of humour dies on you, it's this poor little fluff ball, in a mess that has to be taken to the Misey clinic, to be fixed up. In other words, they live actually outside you and not inside you. And the people in Blanca think that's by far the best way, because then you can look after them and feed them and, make sure that they're well. We think it's strange. They think we're strange because we keep ours locked up inside. But the trouble is, if you have, for example, a temper that escapes from its cage, it's probably a nasty red crab-like thing that's going to bite you and make you shout and yell and get very, very angry. If you lose your temper, you're in real trouble in Blanca. So you have to try and catch it and get it back. And I think some people in the real world have trouble with losing their tempers and not being able to catch them and put them back in their box.
Yeah.
So I think some people maybe sitting in my chair might have that trouble sometimes.
Yes, this is one of the parts of the story. I feel like there's really no age limit on managing your emotions.
Oh, look, in a good children's book, there's never an age limit.
100%.
That's so well said. Yeah.
And you when we were talking just before the podcast, you mentioned that, that was sort of some of your inspiration actually for writing this book was to help, you said,
I was talking about the Misies. Yes. I knew a little boy who had this particular time that I was thinking about, had this, lost his temper quite easily and then found it very difficult to catch it and put it back. Oh, it's a bit like training a dog, You just teach it to sit. And so I suppose that was in my mind when I then thought, yes, and you could also, what would your imagination look like if it was, would it fly around your head like a little bee or a little butterfly? And what would your memory look like? I sort of imagined it would probably be a very shrewd-looking lizard-like thing. Anyway, in Blanca, they keep them on their heads usually in little cages, but some people just keep them loose in their beards. It depends, how they feel.
I love this concept so much. Anytime you wanted to write about Blanca again, I would be there for that.
I'm quite keen on the Misies myself. Yeah. My imagination, my temper, people say, my sense of humour, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And using the analogy of, because there is a character in the book who has perhaps lost control of his temper, and
perhaps he certainly has.
The temper is out of control. It is well and truly lost. And Millie is able to apply logic on dog training from her world to help this Zolo control the temper. And I really loved that one moment where he's like, oh, well, maybe I could give the temper a treat if it's being bad to placate the temper. And Millie says, well, no. Why would you reward that kind of behaviour?
You don't get treats for being bad. You get treats for being good.
And I think that's one of the geniuses of this book, which I think is going to really appeal to. It's the kind of the same sort of thing we were talking about that appeals to, that has a great appeal of Toy Story or, some of these great, animations and things where the children love the book, but the parents that are reading the book to the child, because this book I think can start from a very, very young age. As soon as the child can understand concepts of story, I think this is the time to start reading it. So the absolute kid can read this to themselves, but to have that appeal where you just me as an adult was just like, oh, the way you've worded this is so clever, but that the kid is also still going to just really not feel like they're being taught a lesson.
Oh no,
because that's not what you. That's
no. I would never do that.
No,
it's not that. It's something I found amusing. And if it happens to be useful, I'm very glad.
Yes, it is so funny and charming first and foremost. But it goes back to what you said of there being no age limit on a good story, whether it be there's an age limit on adult stories. That's a silly thing to say. No age limit on a children's story. Because, a wonderful children's book should just speak to those deep truths whilst also being entertaining and in this case, very magical.
Yes.
So that's one of the worlds that Millie visits. She also goes to Shimmer and Gallop. Could we touch briefly on those ones?
Well, in Shimmer, they go there to pick some flowers for Eliza Vanda. They're special flowers because they're everlastings and they can be used, for example, to sew on a dress. But of course there they meet the Shimmer Witch, who is not a pleasant character at all. But it's a traditional fairy tale trope, but I try to turn it a bit on its head.
I did love the way you did that.
Yes, absolutely.
Another example of an important lesson being that appearances can
Be deceiving.
but also presented in such a entertaining way.
Yeah, and who doesn't love a magical mirror?
Oh, yeah.
Indeed.
But
a nasty magical mirror.
But that looked really pretty and very appealing. And speaking of that world, well, one of the other great characters, besides Millie, who is just, I think, just such a relatable character as well, which is great, is Victor. So how did you, what was the thinking behind making Victor sometimes a boy and sometimes not a boy? Just
You're giving away my secrets there.
I didn't say what Victor was.
I think I wanted Millie to have a companion, because when you're on a quest or an adventure, it's much easier if you've got someone to talk to, and anyway, it's more fun.
Yeah.
And Victor is Eliza Vanda's companion and apprentice, I suppose I should say, helper. So he knows more about travelling through the different patches and pockets than, of course, Millie possibly could, because she's a complete new chum as far as that's concerned. I didn't want him to be particularly kind of heroic or even particularly agreeable in a way, so that, in fact, he was one of those people that when you earn his respect, you realise it's the real thing. That's what I like about Victor. He never actually says what he doesn't mean when he's talking about someone else. He sometimes claims heroism that really isn't true, but at other times he does act in a heroic manner. I see him as a completely straightforwardly ordinary character, and useful for Millie. He's a tiny bit taller than her, so presumably he's a tiny bit older.
Okay. Yeah. Yep. That's good, because that's the impression that I got, that he was like, that 1 year older, and at that age when you're, you're just pre-teens, it's like that's a big difference if you're 1 year older and you know a little bit better than the younger children.
Yeah, and I did like what you said about how he's not free and easy with praise.
Not at all. No.
He does say, I won't say what, because we'll leave some things for the readers to discover, but he does give his opinion of Millie, and she is able to overhear it, and it shows the deep power that words can have when you're that age. She's a girl struggling with confidence and she's got some fear about the future, and just some kind words from someone can do so
even
much.
though she's sure he wouldn't have said them if she knew she could overhear, and that's be true too.
Yeah,
but when someone's respect is quite difficult to earn, it actually means quite a lot when you get that.
Definitely. Can we talk more about Eliza Vanda herself?
Yes, what a character.
What was the inspiration?
Well, first it was the buttons that started it, really. I mean, because I have my grandmother's old button box, and it's full to the brim with buttons, and I sorting through, to find a button that matches. I always think, some of these buttons are so special, and some of them are quite old, some of them are in sets, and so on and so forth. Also, of course, I've played lots of times with children, younger children, with the button box, because they like finding the
matching ones.
And anyway, so running my fingers through them, I mean, I know it sounds kind of weird, but I actually love the feeling of them, and I love the way they look. They're like lollies or cakes in a cake shop window.
And they make a sound too.
And they make this lovely clicking sound, as if they're talking to each other. So there I was, finding a button and thinking maybe these buttons are magic. And then I thought, what if they were? And what if the way you went somewhere, and suddenly that little rhyme came into my mind. Buttons 3, attend to me, take me where I want to be. I thought, that's it. I mean, how lovely. And then I remember this dressmaker I haven't seen her for a while, but she made some dresses for me. And she worked out of her home, but she had a sort of workroom built outside her house. And it was like a treasure cave filled with bolts of material and tapes and all different things and masses of buttons. She loved buttons. And I thought, so who will own the button box but somebody like that, a dressmaker, but a dressmaker who doesn't just move from, one suburb to the next or even stay in the same place, but one who does the thing that I often think, some people do in the world, which is slip between the layers, find the chinks, go into other worlds that exist with our own. Eliza Vanda calls them patches, and inside patches there are different pockets, and she visits them, and some of them are very strange indeed, and some of them are like ours, making clothes for a very special clientele.
And perhaps doing some mending.
And doing a little bit of mending.
And that's another thing that I loved, talking about mending, which is mending clothes, but mending, which is mending things that are broken in a more problem-solving way. Yeah.
So she's actually terribly well known as a problem solver, it turns out, as well as a dressmaker. Yeah. And people are calling on her all the time. So, of course, when Millie goes, instead of her, to certain things, that's how Millie finds herself drawn in to the problems.
And proves to be herself a budding young mender.
Yes, indeed, by using a lot of human nous, like how to catch a spider, for example.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I loved so much how things would echo. So things from the real world playing out in the patch and vice versa. That was
Sometimes
wonderful.
people think that, just because you live an ordinary life, like Millie does, you don't know anything. But in fact, you know an awful lot. You think, kids especially think they don't know anything. I used to think I knew nothing and how could I write an interesting book when all I knew was boring? But it's not like, in fact, you know an awful lot. You just don't realise how much you know.
It's about seeing the value and magic in what you view to be ordinary and dull.
Yes. And we always have none of us are, I think, that great at understanding that about ourselves. It does take often someone else to come and point that out to you, or for you to be put into a situation that you've not been in before, that you can realise. That's when you realise that you can actually do more.
Or to perhaps read a wonderful book.
Yes.
That points it out for you.
But I love that there's a mystery in here as well that creeps up as well. It's just such a great combination of things. And there's another fairy tale that you do a little bit of
playing around with
as well, which I think might have been even my favorite one in the book. A bit of a Frog Prince turnaround.
Yes, I enjoyed that very much. Yes, and the whole book sort of, there are various worlds mentioned, but she only visits the three, but they're plenty, don't you think? And she gets into a lot of trouble in all of them. So.
It's perfectly done. And you've told us a bit about your inspiration for it. And it seems as though, I know we had the experience of reading it was extraordinarily fun. Was it a fun writing experience for you?
It was terrifically good fun. It sounds terrible, really. It sounds as though that means it's a trivial book. It's not that.
No.
It was just delight. It was a delight.
Yes, that's how we felt reading it. So.
Yeah. Working out, I actually loved Millie's own pocket, Tidgy Bay. I felt very much as though I knew it and lived in it.
Yep.
I loved the idea of the holiday cabins, each with their own name on the door and things. And writing about Eliza and Victor and their afternoon teas and the things that they ate and going to all these places and seeing these weird things and then being able to cope with it. I found, yes, there really wasn't a part of it that I wasn't smiling, literally.
I think that is infused into the story. I really do. I feel like there's some magic in that when you read a book and it's so delightful and so funny and so moving. I just feel like your experience writing it is somehow trapped in the words.
Oh, well, I'm glad, because that's how it was. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous time for me. It's strange seeing it out in the world now, to tell you the truth.
I can't wait for kids to start reading it.
That's the thing, is that we have to explain. Booktopia is an online bookstore.
Oh, yes.
And so...
And we can't show you visual aids in a podcast.
No.
But we can explain as a physical object.
We're all holding a copy, and we have not been able to stop sort of our fingers running across the cover. It's debossed, which means that the writing is sort of underneath the main cover, and the pinks and the greens and the details.
The intricacies of... Shall we talk about the book cover illustrator and designer? We were discussing them a bit before.
Hazel Lamb
is the designer,
is the
and
book
Jessica
designer.
Cruikshank
is the one who did the illustrations.
Yeah,
And
well,
what a
the
job.
illustrations and the beautiful coloured envelope papers. Jessica also did. His name was Walter. He did the same. You know, won
Same
a design
style.
award for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
It is a stunning book. The illustration is really intricate down to we haven't mentioned Sultan. Sultan is
How could we have not mentioned Sultan? Such a catalyst for so much, for a whole plot line in the book.
Yes, very important figure in the book. Featured on the cover, Sultan is a cat. And,
Yes.
Very unpleasant cat, actually.
Oh yes. He's not one that you'd. Although his owner thinks everyone wants her cat.
Oh, and we didn't. I mean, we briefly touched on the fairy tale trope of an evil witch, but perhaps one of my favourite lines in the book, and actually there's two. I'll just okay. We'll talk about this first one. Is when there's the character in the book, Mrs. Meany, and there's a point at which she's being particularly mean, and then as she sweeps out, Eliza Vanda just has a line where she says, "Oh, that's a sad case. Imagine, being a wicked witch with no powers." And it was such a great line.
I have thought that myself.
But it's connected to my other favourite recurring little part in the book, which is, Eliza responds to that person with some empathy and sorrow that it must be hard to be a wicked witch without powers. But she also will never, forgive me, I can't remember the exact wording of this, but will never squash a bug, no matter how.
Yes, well, that's what another character says of her.
Yeah.
Says, some people think that she ought to have been harder on this particular person.
Yeah.
But Eliza's not one for squashing bugs, even poisonous ones.
I really like that. I like that. I think that will stay with me, and I'll remember it the next time I'm feeling extremely irritated with someone.
I think it's like I said, kids will read this and just love it. Adults will read this and be like, I have learned some lessons today of how I should be behaving towards others.
Yeah, it's a really special book. I'm so delighted to have read it. I'm so thankful that you've been able to come in and speak to us today.
Thank you for having me.
Can we ask what you might be working on next?
Yeah, are we allowed to ask that?
Well, it might rub the magic off.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I will say that I hope there's more. I've already beleaguered you about this previous to recording this podcast. The ending of this book leaves things open for a return to this world.
Just a bit.
Yeah, so whether that happens or not, it's a beautiful ending. I personally hope to see Eliza Vanda again someday, because I enjoyed living in the pages of this book so very much.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, everyone here and everyone who's listening, you can get a copy of Eliza Vanda's Button Box, as well as all the very many beloved backlist titles of Emily Rodda at your local bookstore or online at Booktopia. Thanks for listening, and never stop reading.
Thank you for listening to the Booktopia podcast channel. Don't forget, you can subscribe to us on SoundCloud and iTunes for free, and get access to hundreds of author discussions, book analysis pieces, and more. Or, if your eyes need a workout, head to Booktopia TV on YouTube for all books featured in this podcast, and for access to a whole bunch of other fun content on our blog, head to Booktopia, Australia's local bookstore, at booktopia.com.au.